Ugh, lame. Boring. Been there, done that one. Guys, huddle up. Y'all here? It's kind of hard to count you all. At this point, there's more of you than there are Pokemon species. Paper plate people.
Here.
Obscure lore-filled egg baby.
Here.
Jar of pickles. Great, listen up everyone. Y'all have a big problem on your hands. You all are yesterday's news. People know about you. They survived you. They remember you. Well, except for you, egg baby. Long story short, guys, people know what to expect of you. To be scary, you need to be unexpected, new, unpredictable. And that's why, gentle bears and lady chicks, I introduce you to the new breed. Welcome to the family, guys. Internet, welcome to Game Theory, the show where my waistline is extending faster than the FNAF universe. When it comes to Five Nights at Freddy's, I've made no small deal about how huge this franchise has gotten. I mean, if you're looking to keep up with all the lore, this year, 2020 alone is home to not 1, but 5 new book releases. As if 7 main games, 4 spin-offs, and the Still in the Works movie weren't enough. But there was an announcement made by Scott earlier this year that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. An announcement that, to me, isn't just important to this franchise, but is important for all of gaming. Between all my jokes about how much I hate the franchise and how complex the lore has gotten, I've always said that the way Scott has crafted these games and how he's managed to run his community is perhaps the smartest, most modern way of making a video game. From the very first Five Nights game, he understood that the current age of gaming is all about sharing your experiences, that no 2 playthroughs should ever be alike, that obscure screens, jump scares, glitches, minigames, all of it should appear randomly and with very small probabilities so that people can go online and ask their friends, wait, did you see that? Was this a real thing? From the first appearance of Golden Freddy in the newspaper clippings in FNAF 1, all the way up to help wanted surprise Easter eggs of coffee from his early game The Desolate Hope, these sorts of things form the lifeblood of this franchise. That is what gets people talking about your game, and sharing videos of your game. And yet, it's a game design feature that shockingly modern developers just don't seem to do. But all of that's happening on the micro scale. Today we're zooming out to talk about the big picture. Another move that Scott's made that completely bucks the trend of modern game development and truly embraces what it means to lead a successful franchise in 2020 and beyond, an age of creators and accessible game-making tools. I'm speaking, of course, about the Fazbear Fanverse Initiative, something Scott announced back in August of this year. In case you haven't heard about this thing, here's a quote from the Reddit post. There have been some great fan-made spin-off universes created in this community, and I want to see them keep going. That's why I've put some of my own cash toward development of new games in those game series. However, I'm going to stay out of the development side of things so that these creators can do their thing. They're going to develop these games and interact with the fan base just as they would have normally. And when the games are done, they'll be released on Game Jolt for free, just like normal. The difference now is that they'll also be bundled up with other games and sold on most major consoles and mobile as well. At least that's the plan. Did I mention there may be some toys and other merchandise of these fan games too? It's a project that's designed to invest in those franchises, give back to the developers, and hopefully bring new entries to those franchises as well. So the TLDR version of this, Scott's pulling a reverse Nintendo. He's embracing and extending fan games. He's investing in them, helping them with distribution, and heck, maybe even merch. The first wave of this initiative involves 5 titles. Five Nights at Candy's 4, which, you know, is just FNAF, but with cats. Pop Goes Evergreen, which is, you know, FNAF with rodents. One Night at Flumpty's, which is FNAF with eggs. The Joy of Creation, which is FNAF, but on fire. And FNAF Plus, which is, well, it's just FNAF. Plus. That is obviously a big simplification of all these games just for the joke, but you get the point here. They're all spin-off games with the basis of Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, all of this sounds well and good, right? I mentioned that it seemed like Scott Cawthon was taking the initiative to embrace and extend existing fan works, and those are words with warm and fuzzy vibes, but they're also words that have, well, they have themselves a history that's a lot less warm and fuzzy than you might think, thanks to a third E that's less mentioned, extinguish. That might sound harsh and seem like it's coming out of nowhere, so let me explain what I mean with all this. I think it's necessary to talk about another company that publicly took the embrace and extend approach and what it meant for the evolution of an industry and how Scott is taking a similar approach but turning it on its head. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a lesson on everyone's favorite game theory topic, antitrust law. Antitrust law seems to be a hot topic these days, with Facebook robot Mark Zuckerberg and Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey getting grilled in front of Congress this year not just once, but twice. While it might be a trending topic in 2020, big tech companies getting taken to task for monopolistic and anti-competitive business practices is nothing new. Back in the 90s, before companies like Google and Twitter and Facebook were but a twinkle in some source code's eye, the tech giant that everyone had their sights on was Microsoft. And mind you, this was almost a decade before anyone had even heard of an Xbox. This is back in the days of Internet Explorer, who, let me tell you, was facing some fierce competition from the likes of Chrome? Firefox? Heck no, this is the 90s, baby. Their competition looked a lot more like Netscape Navigator and Mosaic. And Microsoft resorted to some, not so pleasant, and as it turns out, not so legal tactics in order to edge out the competition. During the 90s, Microsoft was public about their strategy of embrace and extend. The basic idea is that you start by finding something that someone else has made, like a technology standard, a protocol, or a tool of some kind, and say, cool, we're gonna embrace it and start using it ourselves. And then you extend upon it by saying, well, this thing that someone else made is cool and all, but we're gonna make it even bigger and better. We're gonna build our own proprietary technology on top of it, and people can begin using our version of that old standard. Steve Ballmer, who at the time was the executive vice president of Microsoft and went on to be president and later CEO, described it in an interview with the New York Times. Quote, "New products and services should simply be extensions of the old. Whether it's me or the guy who replaces me because we don't do well, we'll keep coming, and we will do well." Yeah, I'd say you did pretty well for yourself, Microsoft, and largely because of this embrace and extend motto. Heck, according to one article I read, a Microsoft employee even wrote a song titled The Battle Hymn of the Reorg that ended with that exact phrase. The song goes a little something like this. Oh, our eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the net. We are ramping up our market share. Objectives will be met. Soon our browser will be everywhere. You ain't seen nothing yet. We embrace and we extend. Man, and I thought I was nerdy. On its face, the policy of embracing and extending tools and protocols made by other people seems generous, right? You're adding to what's already there. But what this hides is the fact that once you take an existing standard and extend it with your own proprietary technology, you own the part that you're adding. And not only that, you're replacing the original public open standard with your own version that you alone have control over, effectively taking ownership over a standard that someone else created. And when Microsoft talked publicly about the first two E's, there was a hidden third E that they didn't like to mention in public, extinguish. Because once you've extended the old standard with your own proprietary additions, having effectively hijacked something that someone else had made, you now have control that you can use to extinguish the competition. By the way, that third E, extinguish, isn't just speculation on the part of Microsoft haters. Though Microsoft never talked about it publicly for obvious reasons, an investigation by the US Department of Justice found that the motto extend, embrace, extinguish was used in Microsoft internal communications. And considering that the entire court case centered around the fact that Microsoft was allegedly using anti-competitive practices to bar other companies from competing with them, the fact that they were literally trying to extinguish the competition didn't work all that well in their favor. Pro tip, if you have a business strategy that's evil and illegal, try not to use words that make it sound evil and illegal. And then don't use it in company emails, you doof! The Microsoft example is a bit technical, but it's easy to see examples of a similar strategy used in the entertainment world if you look at Disney. Rather than creating their own original stories, they began by embracing folk tales and classic stories in the public domain, like Sleeping Beauty, Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella, and The Little Mermaid. No problems there. They were open and available for anyone to use. Then, they extended these classic classic fairy tales by creating their own animated versions of these stories with their own spins on them. But then, they effectively extinguished competition by replacing the original work with their own. And when it comes to protecting their own characters and copyright, Disney is fiercely controlling. Unlike Microsoft, Disney has managed to do this without breaking any laws. Technically speaking, they just lobby to change the copyright laws. Mickey Mouse, as a 92-year-old character at this point, should technically be in the public domain by now, except for the fact that the laws seem to mysteriously change every time his copyright is set to expire. Strange coincidence, huh? Couldn't possibly have anything to do with the millions of dollars that Disney's spending to lobby Congress every time it happens, could it? Nah. There is some serious irony in the fact that Disney has worked so hard to prevent their characters from entering the public domain, despite the fact that they began as a company by creating their own versions of classic public domain stories. And in many cases, Disney's versions of these stories have effectively replaced the originals in the public consciousness, which I gotta say is a shame considering I personally want to re-experience the original Little Mermaid's ending, where, you know, she's given a dagger and has to choose to murder the prince or herself. And the Red Sea at sunset is actually the result of her blood pouring out into the water. Yep, that is the original story. Can't imagine why people would prefer the Disney version. Anyway, it's not all that surprising that you go to the books section of Amazon and search for classic fairy tales like Cinderella. The first thing that pops up is a Disney coloring book. Disney's worked really hard to make sure that their version of the story is the only version of the story that matters. So is Scott Cawthon guilty of doing the same thing here? Funding fan projects might seem like a generous gesture, but is this really part of his plan for world domination? Well, the short answer here is no. In fact, while his strategy might at first appear to have some superficial similarities with the behavior of Microsoft in the 90s, you can actually argue that he's doing the exact opposite of the business practices that we see from companies like Microsoft and Disney. And this applies to basically every step in the process. For instance, Microsoft worked by embracing public standards or products that other people had created, and Disney worked by embracing fairy tales and folk stories from the public domain. They were effectively targeting things that other people had created. But here, Scott is honing in on what's effectively his territory to begin with. Scott's own work is the foundation on which these fan creations were made. They exist with his blessing. This is something that we talked about in our FNAF fan art video from last year, but the long and short of it is that while Scott doesn't have the rights to publish work created by fans without their permission, fans don't have the rights to publish work based on his characters without his permission. All the fan creators are working with Scott's blessing, but ultimately it's his characters and intellectual property to do with as he pleases. He's not capturing someone else's folklore and planting his flag in it to claim ownership over it. His flag was already there to begin with. And what's more, he's doing this with the full consent of the fan creators, which brings us to the second E, extend. Rather than trying to extend these fan works for himself in a way that would allow him to claim creative ownership over them the way that Microsoft did, he's leaving the power in the hands of the fan creators and letting them be the ones to extend their own fan lore. And lastly, the third E, extinguish. Once again, it feels like Scott's doing the opposite of the original EEE strategy. Rather than trying to quash other creators so that the only thing left in the space is his original FNAF games, the entire point of this initiative is to include and promote other creators who can offer their fan games as an alternative. Not satisfied with only 7 official FNAF games? Here, check out what other people have made. And now, you can check them out on more platforms since they're coming to consoles and smartphones, and Scott Cawthon has given them the development resources to make it happen. So yeah, I think that far from being an example of a monopolistic business trying to control everything, this is an example of the opposite. Rather than being overprotective with his IP and issuing a cease and desist to anyone who tries to create their own fan game or spin on his creation, Scott is doing the opposite. He's giving the fan community's biggest developers even more resources, all while letting them have control over their own products. If all of this is starting to sound like one big puff piece and you're feeling ripped off that you got this far into a video without any tea being spilled, sorry, the drama you're looking for is in another castle. Because this, to me, feels like the future of the games industry. In the internet age, this age of social media, we are a culture of remixers. We meme, we take other people's creativity, we build upon it. We embrace the world that they've created to make our own original works via fan art, via fan fiction. And that is something that should be welcomed, embraced. If your product is important enough in someone's life that they want to develop their own version of it, they want to show their own fandom by doing their own video, game, whatever, that is a compliment. You hire them, you bless their work, you be a mentor to them, whatever it is. I can't help but think about Sonic Mania, which was created by a team known for their work in the Sonic fan game and ROM hack community. properties, and Sega gave them the keys to the kingdom to produce what's probably the best canonical Sonic game in recent history. Now contrast Scott and Sega's behavior with Nintendo, banning Twitch live streams for games that were paid for and played on release day, shutting down fan games because they were worried about it competing with their own products, shutting down tournaments run by people that are still really passionate about a multiplayer game that was originally released back in 2001. Sorry to pick on you, Nintendo, but I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think it was deserved. These are bad moves. When games like Pokemon Uranium or another Metroid 2 remake come out, you just kill them. You stomp on them. What could be, and are in many cases, fully fleshed out games made by creators who spent years putting them together out of a love for your work, you put them through a shredder. Congratulations, you protected your IP, but you killed the love of your community in the process. And from a purely financial standpoint, heck, you could have just embraced those projects. Could have hired those people on, you polish them up a little bit, you had 2 quick and easy money makers. If you're thinking about it from just the pure cold-hearted dollars and cents, that is money you left on the table. Period. I'm sorry, times have changed and the industry needs to change with them. With so many scummy, exploitative, and downright crummy business practices that exist within the gaming industry, it can be easy to lose sight of the positive stories, the companies that are doing it right. And if we're able to recognize the more positive examples of how some companies are able to succeed by doing the right thing, maybe we can get just a little bit more of that sort of thing. FNAF is a huge example of a game that isn't just a game, it's a community of fans that pour tremendous amounts of love and effort into making their own content. Whether it's the Let's Play videos that first brought the game onto the scene during its early days, or the people that have gone the extra mile and been inspired to create their own fan games. The Fazbear Fanverse initiative is a great example of what can happen when fans love a game franchise, and the franchise is willing to love them back. I just wish more people were paying attention. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.